Welcome to the CyberFed show. I'm Dan Manson. I teach computer information systems at Cal Poly Pomona. Each week, this broadcast will cover the world of cybersecurity competitions, similar to a sports show. We believe cybersecurity competitions are like a sport. In these shows, we drill down into competitions and provide stories, scores, and statistics. We believe those that participate in competitions are cyber athletes with the same training, passion, and coolness, plus a few additions. The opportunities for these athletes to go pro is much greater. And in our world today, we are falling behind our real competition. Let's get started. This week, ESPN launched an eSports site that provides daily coverage of industry news, match results, and profiles for prominent players, along with long-form content exploring the market's history and explosive growth. ESPN.com editor-in-chief Chad Millman stated, "Fans will find the same level of quality content and journalism that users of ESPN.com have come to expect, including in-depth looks at the competitive gaming world and on-site reporting from the major tournaments. We believe that esports are about 10 years ahead of cybersecurity competitions in development, marketing, funding, and being a spectator-friendly activity, but there are connections between esports and cybersecurity competitions. A CyberFed press release last year listed these, including game scenarios, exponential growth in number of teams and players, and demonstrating skill using computers. A big difference today is that esports are fun to watch and easy to understand. Cybersecurity competitions are not. The movie Ender's Game may provide some clues on connecting esports with cybersecurity. At our Cyber Day LA competition coverage last fall, we asked Franklin High School Cyber Patriot coach Yenny Yi how she is able to take her teams to the Cyber Patriot finals year after year. Her inspiration is something familiar to every gamer, the movie Ender's Game.
So you do a lot of team building. You do a lot of creative activities with your team. And we've talked about inspirational stories for the team, whether it's a sports story. But one of the things that you've talked about, maybe you could touch on of the importance of it, is the movie Ender's Game. Mm-hmm. That has some value to what you're trying to instill into your teams.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of different relationships that happen in Ender's Game. The relationship between Ender and the first team that he was a part of, and then how he had to create his own team, and then his ability to rise as a leader. I think the most important quality to have to be a strong player is confidence, and to have confidence, and then to be able to show and to lead somebody else. You just fall into that leader role, right? So I think in terms of the development of Ender, I think that's our players. They come into it and they are very naive and very they're naive. They don't really know anything, and they develop, and then they begin to see the game, and then they begin to understand how to best use each other in the sense of coming up with the result of winning. Right.
Well, and I think a beautiful part of Ender's story that I see in your students there and in your explanation of their maturity and their evolution is, Ender had to learn how to not only play the game, how to build a team, how to lead a team, but he also had to wrestle with his own demons in the meantime. Right. And figure out who he really was as a character.
Right. And I think that's why Ender's Game was it's so interesting to me that they picked, the whole premise is that these are kids that they picked. Right. To run these simulations, right? So what we have in terms of Cyber Patriot and in my team is that we're developing young people. It's not we're developing necessarily Cyber Patriot competitors. We are developing these young people to be competitors, mm-hmm. So we can't ignore the fact that they're young people still developing and help them to develop,
Absolutely. Dan and I talk quite a bit about this being cybersecurity, not the U.S. versus Russia, not the U.S. versus China. It really being a species level problem that, as a species, we're all in together and we're all trying to solve pretty much the same way.
Right.
One of the things that I believe is that you know, when kids play a sport, they can aspire to be playing it as a professional. And I think what's cool about Cyber Patriot is that there are people who have to do this as part of their job, is to find vulnerabilities and fix vulnerabilities and defend against attacks. So, you know, it may be something that they're doing at 14 and 15, but this is something that adults wrestle with, so they're learning something that is an adult skill.
Right, and you know, I talked about this earlier, but critical thinking, I mean, you know, that is applicable to every part of your life. So I get very frustrated when, you know, there's questions that are asked. And, you know, I don't think of any dumb questions, but I do challenge them, and I won't answer certain questions because I'm like, okay, what do you think in terms of this? Because they have to critically think. And we want our, you know, we want not just our young people, but adults as well. But for me specifically, teaching young people how to critically think is so important. I mean, again, you can apply it to any aspect. Here we're applying it to cybersecurity, but we have to be critical thinkers. We have to look at the environment around us and think about what is going on. How am I involved? What is my part? How do I change things?
Well, and that's a lot of the Ender story also, is learning that not only does inspiration hide in suffering, but how do you deal with your own internal suffering and
Right.
the suffering of others around you?
I'm sure that, you know, your students don't necessarily come from the top socioeconomic part of Los Angeles, so they have things they wrestle with, you know, outside of school, and you have to get them to deal with everything else they deal with in life, and then deal with everything internal that goes on in a team. But the success that you've had is amazing. The places that your students have gone. Can you talk about a few of your success stories and how they started and where they are now?
Sure. So you touched upon a couple things. Number one, the socioeconomic status of the students in terms of their families. You know, I think what we try to teach our students and what we learn through our program is that should never be an obstacle. That should never hinder you from being successful. So it's an obstacle. So how do we get over obstacles? Well, we fight and we do what we can with what we've got, and then we make it through, right? In terms of the success of our students, so our students have gone on to UCLA, UC Berkeley, MIT, to Yale, to UC Santa Cruz, UC Irvine, and Georgetown. So we've had students that have gone on to very prestigious colleges. I would consider all of those prestigious. But more than that, I think there were students in our program that didn't envision going to college, or that didn't envision, you know, school was not their thing. And then through what they've learned in terms of the work ethic and how to deal with things and how to approach classes, they were able to successfully navigate through high school and then find their way into a college.
If you have a competition you would like us to cover in a future show, please contact us at cyberfed.org. I'm Dan Manson. See you next week.